This is the Seers Seed podcast, where we explore the seer gift within the Kingdom of God mindset.
Hello, Emily.
Hey, Doug.
I was just saying that I am battling a cold. I think it's a cold, and so I apologize if I sound all sniffly. But I didn't want to cancel. We've been a little irregular, and I realized that I've not edited and posted a bunch of episodes, so I started working on those yesterday to get kind of caught up as we transition eventually to doing this live.
Right.
And so I went to this conference last week at the called a More Love, More Power conference, and I just had a lot of. I mean, it was, I don't know, sound cheesy, but like a fresh indwelling of the Holy Spirit. But I was totally refreshed, and the Lord spoke to me about some things about the seer ministry and refreshing the website and getting some of the stuff, being a little more intentional about things. Before I called you, my daughter's home for this week, and that's fun. And she was telling me that at her church, she overheard someone describing, seeing in the spirit realm, and someone who was completely troubled by it and just has always had it. So she said, I didn't mean to overhear you, but I overheard you, and gave her a copy of the book.
Nice.
And this has been a few weeks ago. Hey, yeah. And then she just told me before I got on that that woman this last Sunday said it's changed her life.
Wow.
Yeah. And her husband's, who has not read the book, but she shared so much of it with him. Like it's just, yeah, it just changed. It's just provided clarity and peace and just changed life. And I'm like, that's lovely.
You feel so alone. And until you finally find someone else who's either desperate enough or brave enough to say, hey, this is what I'm experiencing, you just feel like you're a freak. It's troubling. And am I mentally ill? Am I demon possessed? And all the other, just the worst scenario pops in. And so, yeah, speaking out about it, having a book, having a podcast, all the stuff that we can throw people's ways and say, hey, you're not weird. And I think I was telling a friend yesterday, I said, I think 90% of what I do is just basically telling people, yeah, that's normal. Yeah. You're normal.
It reminds me a little bit of, you remember back in the day when you were pregnant? And so what do we do when young families get pregnant? We go out and we get the book, What to Expect When You're Expecting. Remember those?
Yes.
And what struck me about that book is it basically says every symptom is normal.
Right.
I'm experiencing, symptom A. Well, yeah, that's normal. And then I'm experiencing the exact opposite symptom. Yep, that's normal too. And there's very few things that are abnormal. And those are the things that say, I'll go to the doctor about that. But it struck me, I was very amused that, you have a community of wisdom in that book. It used to be, you would go talk to you'd go talk to someone in the village or whatever, and like, oh yeah, that's normal, everything. Yeah. Well, and yeah, a lot of this, her story, even what she just shared with me, reminds me of the email in this chapter 9, Pillars of Interpretation, where you just have vomit of the mouth from this 15-year-old, and when I contemplated, I have hundreds, maybe thousands of emails from people, and it was hard to pick a few, and I mean, a lot of this book has lots of testimony, and I think that helps a lot of people. And this one jumped out at me when I was trying to select something about being fearful.
Oh, there's a lot of stuff in this.
Yeah, and I just thought, well, what should I cut out? And I said, you know what? Screw it. I'm not cutting anything out. I did cut some out, but I'm leaving it mostly in there because this is what happens when you get someone who has a chance to share her experiences for the first time with someone who's not going to judge, and just.
Yeah, and I've had the same experience, like we've talked about before, people sitting on my porch, people sitting, I don't know how many times a church parking lot after service, sitting on the back of a car, just it all comes out because it's the first time people have felt safe enough to actually say this. Yeah. And And yeah, and I know people have probably seen me struggle as we've done the podcast, as I'm trying to find words to put to it, because there's just things that I haven't had to articulate before, or I never got the
Mhm.
chance to articulate before. So, you know, eh, in a lot of ways, this has been really, really good for me to have to say, okay, here's some terminology I can use that hopefully is comprehensive to the average person. And so,
That's kind of neat. I think that speaks to like poetry and music
mhm,
and even art. That's a much later chapter we talk about based on your master's thesis. Actually, we talk a little bit about poetry. I mean, like it is hard to. I even say in this chapter, I was rereading it this morning, that a lot of times I present this stuff in a sterile way,
mhm, mhm.
like almost a systematic way, and this is not a systematic experience. It's like it's
And we're back
it's
to childbirth.
yeah, it's like visceral. It's like yeah, like in childbirth. Okay, well you'll first feel the compression, and but then when you first feel it, like whoa, that's not how I read about it in the book. Yeah.
Words did not do it justice. And that's the thing. It's kind of like when you do try to put words to it, it's almost like you're minimizing, even though you might be in trying your best to maximize. It
Hmm.
still doesn't capture it. But I also think it's kind of like when we're reading through the Bible and and the people are talking about their experiences. I'm reading through Genesis right now with the grandkids, and I'm reading a children's version of the Bible, and these two men showed up with God to have dinner with him.
Yeah.
Think about that for a second. We, but how else are you supposed to say that? The great King of Glory, you divested himself of all wonders and walked on. Then now all of a sudden, nobody wants to read that. So
Yeah, I was reading Brueggemann. Um,
great stuff.
yeah, and he was describing how like Homer and other period pieces written in that same period as the Old Testament would go on and on and on, and and just and leave very little to interpretation.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And so I think one of the beautiful things about Genesis and really the Bible in general is it leaves so much open for you to interpret. And so I think it's why one of the reasons the Bible is so applicable. But like, yeah, well, two men showed up to have, like Yahweh and two angels show up for dinner. And, sure, sometimes you get like in Daniel when he's literally shaking while the angel's giving his interpret or giving the vision. And like, I'm sorry, it took me 21 days to get here. He's like, he's freaking out, like, here, stand up. I have a message for you. And he's like shaking is what it says. And, but
Angels.
I mean, maybe Abraham was shaking too. Could you imagine? Like, you're Abraham and you're like, God, Yahweh says, leave your home and I'm going to go to a place with you. And he goes.
Mhm, mhm.
But still, how terrifying.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've tried to decide whether that's easier or harder than the walk we've been called to as modern believers.
Oh,
And,
yeah.
you know, but I do love kind of going back to the room for interpretation that you were talking about. The Bible very rarely gives definitions.
Right.
It gives descriptions, because a definition, by definition, says something begins and ends here. And because it's always talking about something holy, something spiritual, something where the divine and the supernatural interacts with the physical, it's got to leave those spaces. And that's the reason why we get descriptions of God, not a definition of what God is. Because there's got to be room for the imagination. That's as close as we're going to get to any kind of, I hate to use the word image, but idea, sense, vibe of who or what God is. And because you put it down in plain English or Hebrew or Greek, whatever, it diminishes what we're being presented with.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah. Yeah. Because I guess it goes to the theory of words, right? The theory of language, trying to put words are just symbols
yeah.
of ideas.
And it's helpful, but I think and I totally did not even think about going here, but we're on Twitter or X, we're on
Hmm.
Facebook, and everything's written down in these words, and it's we've got this idea that words are the end all be all. And that's all there is to this moment or this person or this event. And that's not the case. And I think we've forgotten how to read with the awe and the wonder of, that the great classics inspired people to. And like Homer you had to think what was actually on Achilles' sword, what was the image that was there, every little detail and nuance. So that was important. And even that, even though it was so precise, it still invited you to dream. And
Yeah, I think of something too. You told me, maybe not on the podcast, but just like Hebrew itself is a very I don't say visual, maybe you should say like visual or lyrical or poetic or
it's all pictures, man. And it's abstract. It gives you like the starting point, but then you have to go in to like plumb out the deeper stuff. I mean, a real easy example is the word for anger is off. And so you've got this emotion, but it's also the word for nostril. Well, why? Because you flare your nostrils when you're mad. So it's even that, even though it's an emotion and it doesn't seem to be connected to the physical in our Western minds, there's this intense picture that comes along with it. And so I love that. Or, the Spirit of God brooded over the face of the waters. It's this nurturing picture of a bird on its nest. And so when you say these words, you don't just get the concept, you get an entire story, backstory, and process and history that gets brought right into it. And when you start looking at that aspect of the language, man, you realize that all of our systematics are just scratching the surface.
Yeah. I think you mentioned nostril. That's kind of cool. I didn't know that, but like a life or breath or something is the same word as neck. I could be, I'm close.
Ruach, breath, spirit, wind, all the same word.
And it's because you can see the pulse. Like one of those words, something about life is related to the neck because you can see the pulse. I can't remember what it is.
I'm drawing a blank right now.
I read that somewhere, and when I was doing research, I'm like, oh, again, it's so visual. Like, of course it would be, and.
But think about that. I mean, it's the spirit connecting with the physical. And it's that idea that this is a holistic system. And I think it's one of the great disservices that Greek did to God's word. Now, I think it was necessary for the New Testament, don't get me wrong. But when we adopted not just the language that's so precise, but also this Platonic idea and way of bifurcating the spiritual and the physical, this is when things like seers become superfluous. They became oddities that really didn't have a place to fit because seers, we live in that in between. There's not a physical and a natural as two separate spheres. They're together. And if you don't get that interconnectedness, I think you're always kind of going to be torn. And you're either going to be shutting one out, you shut the physical out, you become the crazy lady who lives in the swamp, which is very appealing, don't get me wrong. Or you become so analytical and emotionally dead just to cope with life. So that's speculation on my part. Maybe that's just unique to me, but I kind of don't think it is based on conversations I've had with other seers.
Yeah. You're right. I have Logos open and went to Genesis 1:2, and I right clicked on Spirit, and I wish I could share my screen, but I'll send it to you. Very rarely, throat, neck, breath, living being.
There we go.
Mostly breeze, breath, wind, spirit, sense, mind, intellectual frame of mind, spirit of the dead, spirit, wind, mind, and then throat, neck, which makes sense, right? Because this is where you go, is this person alive?
Right.
And
first place you can touch. Yeah.
And I love it that it's the breath because it evokes life. It's moving. The spirit is moving.
Yeah.
Spirit's always moving.
And then you get into Genesis 2 where God inspires Adam, and that whole idea of Walton does a great job with the temple account of the Garden of Eden and how we are the image of the God that's being
Right.
worshipped in there. I mean, it's amazing.
It's
So
amazing. Yeah.
I know we totally got off track because we're going to go over this email, but it's
Yeah. I mean, yeah. What are your thoughts on it?
how we want to handle it, because we didn't discuss how we're going to handle it.
No, I know. I put it in there. I just kind of wanted to go into overcome fear with love, because this email is just one long email about a fear.
Mhm.
Um,
I kind of went through and I made some notes on some of her experiences.
yeah, let's just talk through your notes.
Okay. Well,
So again, the context is I received this email from a 15-year-old. Put almost the whole email in this chapter, illustrating the point of it is this is an intense experience living with this ability, and I really wanted the frustration of her heart to reach the reader's heart.
and it's there. It's so on display.
And so I mentioned this months ago, but some of these emails, I don't try to correct theology in the email.
Mhm.
So sometimes someone may say something in an email, and I just put it in there that maybe I theologically don't agree with. And that's not the point. The point isn't fixing theology. It's the point is meeting people where they're at in this fear and in this gift, and try to reframe the gift and bring peace, to the storm.
Well,
Now she doesn't have any. I don't think she has necessarily bad theology in here. I'm just saying that.
Well, I think the first thing we have to do is validate, hey, you're not crazy.
Right.
And if we start out with, well, you're wrong here, here, and here,
Mm-hmm.
shut down the conversation.
Yeah.
And I think once you kind of build a relationship with someone, I mean, honestly, if I haven't had a chance to build a relationship with you, I haven't had a chance to walk with you for a while, I'm not going to trust your theology anyway. I don't care what you're giving me.
Sure.
So, I mean, and especially when it's something this personal, this is not an abstraction like, I don't know, original sin, which we could debate the concept of it all day long, but even though we may agree that it impacts us, it does not impact us the same way that, I mean, like she does start out with the talking about her situation. I'm actually in chapter in the paragraph 2, and she was talking about seeing images and colors popping out of nowhere, and that happened just this week, like in a very vivid way. I was sitting in my chair, I was reading a book, had music on shuffle, the song came on, boom, I see an image of something in my house that's in a total different part of my house, and it's like, I need to go check that out. And there was something I needed to see there. There's something I needed to find there. And you will, or at least I do, and evidently she does too. You get these images that will pop out. I was praying for a friend one time who was a pagan. In the middle of the prayer, I see this bird the feathers just being ripped out of it. And I knew exactly what life event that it referred to. And I was able to go to her and talk to her about it, because those images were just, they're almost like stabbing when they hit. It's not like, oh, I just see it. It's like they hit you in the head, and they have a tangible force. So when she says this, I'm like, okay, yeah, I totally understand what she's talking about. And I know a lot of seers, and I know a lot of people who don't even consider themselves seers, because this only happens kind of internally.
Sure. Yeah.
And
Yep.
so I think a lot of people with just a prophetic gifting will do. And so I know other prophets who have described things with the imagery, but we see that in the Bible over and over again. And yet when people today say something like this, they're like, oh, well, you got such an active imagination. Look at you.
Yeah.
Say
Right.
that to Ezekiel. I wonder if Ezekiel, now I've got that thought, like somebody walking up to Ezekiel, oh, you have such an active imagination.
I know, it's funny. So he and Daniel, they see the throne, and they both describe it. They both describe the same thing, except that Ezekiel describes it like he's an engineer.
Right. Yeah.
It's like, it reads almost like a schematic. He's so detailed, and Daniel's like way more abstract and emotional. It's kind of funny.
And I love the fact that, I mean, and I particularly looked a lot at Jeremiah and Ezekiel. I love the fact that God has these two guys who are diametrically opposed in worldview, experience, life, everything, and they're describing the same things.
Hmm.
And it shows you that there's room for the individual in God's kingdom. And
Yeah, years ago, I was this guy I was in relationship with in the sort of the fringe Christian community. He suggested a test. Like he didn't understand the Seers thing, and he was a little skeptical. Like a test. So at church, find two Seers and interview them separately, see if they see the same thing. I'm like, well, I mean, like I'm not sure it works like that because people have different levels of gifting and people are in different areas of walk with God. But then you have Daniel or you have Jeremiah and Ezekiel and Daniel and John, the Revelator for that matter, all sort of describing the same thing. And then I remember that at the Seer conference we were at, you girls all saw the same thing, So it was.
that was so cool because it's so rare. And yeah, just like fireworks. I mean, I felt everybody, go, ooh, ah.
Yeah.
And then we're comparing notes. It's like, yeah.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
and when you have been given this, oh, quit being so dramatic and you don't let your imagination run away with you. And then to have like concrete confirmation that this is actually happening and you are actually, because really think about what the implications of this is, that I am actually perceiving and reacting to real stimulus, whether
Hmm.
it's an image, a smell, a sight, sound, whatever. I'm not just creating an illusion, a hallucination inside my brain. That's the difference between sanity and insanity. And if somebody keeps telling you that you're crazy long enough and you're still perceiving this,
Right.
and no wonder the poor kid. I mean, I feel for her, but that was the thing when I was reading through here. I'm looking at what she's describing, flashes of colors and lights. Oh my goodness! All last week there was some major spiritual stuff going on here. I've got random blue and green, purple shadows going through the house. I've got balls of lightning going through my house. It's happening just as recently as last week. Now, there is one angel still patrolling, which is really cool. But, it's, it, you tell people that. I mean, even my husband, who's lived with me for 15 years, salt of the earth, love him. He's a great balance of this for me. He's like, uh-huh. Yeah, I'm gonna go work in the shop now. Like, and I've had to learn he doesn't have the processing capacity for this. It's like he doesn't disbelieve me and he doesn't tell me that I'm being weird, but at the same time, it's like he does not know how to engage with that because he's gonna go dig into some dirt, he's gonna go
It's
hammer.
also hard to know what to do with it.
Yeah.
Like what does it mean? Which is what this chapter is about, like how to interpret, how not to overinterpret.
Yeah.
You
And,
know.
and that's really hard because it's such an all-encompassing experience.
Right.
And because even like when I'm seeing flashes of color, and I don't know how much of this is with the Seers gift and how much is with synesthesia because I do have that on top of that. Um, like the colors will flash in. I was driving yesterday and there were colors flashing. It was like it was hitting the side of my
Hmm.
head, and I had to like, okay, we're gonna keep our eyes on the road and
Hmm.
see between the lines. And so that happens, and that's what I mean by all encompassing. It's not just I see something over there. It's not like seeing a picture on the wall.
Right.
And I think that's one of the big things that people don't realize. It takes your breath.
Hmm.
It makes your eyes water. It can make your ears ring. All of that can happen as part of this gifting. And so,
Sometimes people will say too, well, man, it must be something real dramatic going on, and prophetically or in the world. And like, no, these things are for you in this situation. And this conference I was at last week, there's a few thousand people in the auditorium, and the speaker said, a few of you are going to get called. God, he said, Jesus is going to have a hook in you, and you're not going to get it out, and you're being called to suffer, for the gospel.
mhm,
And like you're not going to get it out. And he said it's only a few. He said, and I believe that Jesus can bring all of us here for just a few people. Oh,
Mhm.
God has something for the rest of you too. Don't worry.
Right.
But really it's for those few people. And like, that's how Jesus works sometimes. I mean, like, not everything. It's like we had incredible experiences actually of just repentance and just really wailing and mourning for sin and stuff. But my last job, I I thought I was going to a career for myself and my family, and I was going to finish, maybe work there for the next 10 years. And at some point, the Lord spoke to me whenever I ministered to someone who watches this podcast, and he told me when it was revealed this person was a seer, and I'm like, oh. And then God's like, this is why you're here, for this moment right here. This is why I brought you out of your last job into this place for this moment. I'm like, and in my mind, in the split second, the millisecond, I'm like, wait a minute, I was recruited here by a recruiter, and I was not happy with my last job, but I was recruited here, and I've done a lot of good things, honestly, in the company, and there's been some warfare, and I've never really understood that. I couldn't understand some of the warfare that went on, but there's been some breakthroughs recently, but all that wasn't about me.
Right.
It was all, and he's like, you said you're loose change. You said, I am loose change. Spend me how you want. And I like, yeah, I did say that. And he said, so I did. And my love for that person is so great that I orchestrated all this stuff for that one moment for her.
Mhm.
And I'm like, you were awesome. This is all in a split second. And later I just had to sort of process it. I think I processed it with you even. And I'm like, Jesus's love for us is so incredible. And so all these experiences, they're not about what's going on in Washington or end times prophetic stuff. It's like, it's what's going on in your current circumstance, and you are having these spiritual experiences. And that's just how it works sometimes.
Yeah.
God
Well,
loves us intensely.
you think of feeding 5,000,
Hmm.
and how many people followed after that? How many
Right.
people stayed by his side? That wasn't for the entirety of the 5,000. That was for the select few who stayed, the ones who continued. And did God begrudge feeding 5,000? No. If that's what it took to get that handful of people, and you metaphorically speaking, that
Mhm.
he's willing. I mean, he's extravagant. And I was talking to a friend about this the other day, because there were some circumstances with even some weather, and I'm like, so God decided that Oklahoma needed tornadoes so that this could work out on my behalf. Like, he
Yeah.
could. And I'm like, I'll
And
take.
sometimes he does that. Oh, it's all about you. Like, no, he works. Yes, Jesus' relationship with you is all about you, honestly, and your neighbor, and the person down the street, and the church up the road, and like, he's an infinite God.
Exactly, exactly. That is the benefit of being an infinite God. His love and care that he lavishes on me does not diminish anything he has for my next door neighbor, the people 3 towns over or around the world. It does not diminish that. I think so often, because we've been taught to be so linear in how we think, we
Mm,
we think of eternity as from infinite point A in the past to infinite point B in the future. No, it's that, but every point along the way coming out, in every point from there coming out, and it's
right.
not
That's a
a
great point.
one, yeah, it's not a one linear thing. Uh, Infinite is not what you can hold in your mind. The minute you think you can hold it in your mind, you've just you stop thinking about the infinite possibilities.
I mean,
Blah.
I know some seers that they'll have a vision of on the street of just countless spirits. Like,
Mhm.
these are all the spirits here right now. And I think, well, in that particular moment, I think maybe it was all the spirits, past, present, maybe even future. Like, you're having a vision of the infinite at that moment.
Yeah.
And and that's just kind of how, I mean, and so why? I mean, I don't, this is why we have this book, right? To sort of wrestle with why and give purpose to it. But in that case, it just reminds you that we're all part of a story,
Right.
a long, long story. And we often have tunnel vision,
Mhm.
and like, you're just thinking like right now. And um But we're all part of this ancient faith
Right.
in an infinite God.
Hmm. Hmm.
We're not part of an infinite God. Let me phrase that. But our faith in an infinite God.
Well,
I'm not a monist. Just clarifying.
yeah, yeah. Well, I think that's why we as human beings, people are going to think I'm really losing it here. But I'll put it out there because it's a great idea. Um, I think that's why we as human beings, we're so obsessed with time travel. Think of how many books, movies, whatever.
I love Doctor Who. There's a Doctor Who. There's
Yeah.
more than one Doctor Who reference behind me, and that weeping angel is somewhere because it moves if you don't look. So,
But I think worship is a form of time travel
mhm.
because we step into this moment where we are joined and we're interacting with this infinite God. And I think there's something in our spirit that longs for that sense of infinity. And so worship gives us that. And I think that's part of the reason why we try to counterfeit it. Because we don't
Mhm.
know how to express this, so we try to find it in science. So we're going to make these time machines. Before we had science, you're going to step into a fairy ring. I'm reading Cherokee Myths right now. It's great how many times people go away and they're gone for a few hours overnight, and then they come back and it's so long people think they're dead.
Right. At the More Love, More Power conference, one of the sessions, all he did was read a throne scene from the book of Revelation.
Mm-hmm.
And a woman next to me, it just came out as this guttural wail.
Get goosebumps.
It's just reading, no music, no smoke machine, not just reading the open the scroll scene, right? And it was a travailing wail.
Mm-hmm.
And like that's an eternal scene, right? It's like that was written thousands of years ago, Emily, and he just read it, and it was like it's present, right? She was there, she was transformed at that moment, and it was grief, and I mean, what the Lamb has done for us is a big freaking deal, and it's worth. And it was a spirit-induced travailing wail. I mean, it wasn't a demon; it was the Holy Spirit, right,
Yeah.
moving in and through her, and yeah, I mean, the scriptures can transform. Just reading the scriptures.
Well, and it took a seer to write that.
Yeah.
And why do you think seers come under attack so often? How many seers have squandered their gift, have walked away denied because the enemy has hit so hard because he doesn't want you to see stuff like that. He doesn't want you being able to testify to the greatness and the glory of God. Because you have those experiences, it changes you. Now, the really weird part, and the really weird part is in that moment, everything is so vivid, so real, so intense and vital, and you think this is all I need to survive. This is it. I can exist here forever. And then we step back up on this linear timeline of human existence, and it fades so fast.
Mm-hmm.
It fades so quick. And that's another reason that seers have a hard time being taken seriously, because I mean, you had this great experience with God last week, and you're not any different this week than you were the week before the experience. Well, it's because
Right.
it faded. And why did it fade? Because we shut up, because we were told we were crazy. We were told that we were, being insane for even thinking that we were special enough to have this experience. And oh, how arrogant are you? And the first time I had I still have a hard time. I almost stumbled over it. The first time I had something I would call a vision. Oh my gosh, to actually use that word.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, no, we don't have visions. That's Old Testament stuff. That's Bible stuff. That quit after the apostles were gone,
Sounds a little new age, right? If someone goes into a trance,
Mm-hmm.
even though it literally says Daniel went into a trance.
Yeah.
With one of his visions, and then you do have almost a time travel. I love that example. You do almost have a time travel, because I know people who will lay there in a trance for hours and they think it's 5 minutes. They come out of it. Oh, I had this amazing vision. And they told the story, and hey, you were out for like 3 hours, and like, really? Yeah, it's midnight.
I'm the opposite. I felt like I was gone for years once, and 3 minutes.
Wow.
And totally changed. I mean, that literally did change the course of my life. And so that's the reason why I know Hebrew and Greek. Because it can. 3 minutes with God can change you. And it can change everything.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, but again, so, okay, in the email, the next thing she mentions that I underlined is she would get night terrors, and she would be awake at night because of something I would see or dream. I don't know a single seer who has not wrestled with night terrors, nightmares, panic attacks, sleep paralysis, because I think it gets too close to that trance-like state.
Mm-hmm.
It gets to, because there is something about that where your cognitive mind and all the shields. Lauren was on with us not too long ago, and we were talking about, because she works with the public. I used 2 years ago. Thank God I don't have to do that on a daily basis anymore. I love individuals. I am not always a fan of people. But anyway, she said, when she's at work, that those shields go up. But then when you're home and you're relaxing, those shields, because you got to have that.
Right.
You're going to survive. And so I think there is something about attacking this in-between state of awake and asleep that it really is. It's a targeted enemy attack on seers. Because a couple of things, I think I mentioned this on the episode with Lauren. I think dreams and all of this are training sessions. It's teaching you how to deal with this stuff in a safe, controlled environment. And what I found is, once I learned to trust, I am safe here.
Yeah.
I could press through, and I quit having them. I really did. When I'm like, hey, God's on the other side of this. That's what this is to teach me, is to keep my eye on him. And as soon as I got good at that, it's
so hang on. So that's how you get through the night terrors or the sleep paralysis stopped?
Yeah. I just got to find God.
Wow.
He's on the other side. He's not under it. He's not around it. It's right through the center of the thing I'm scared of the most. And I just envision myself rushing at it, just charging right at it, because I got to get to the other side. And so almost like that cartoon scene, and it doesn't matter what I'm having to tear through, he's on the other side. And like I said, it's been decades. And so, but I also, I think I wrote a thing, it's been 3 weeks ago or something, about the connection between Psalm 82 and the Lord's Prayer.
Yeah.
That was in that half asleep, half awake thing. I'm listening to Psalm 82 in Hebrew, and my mind kind of just does this, 180 off the Hebrew, and I'm suddenly into the Greek of the New Testament, and it's I see this crystal, and I see the points of connection. That doesn't happen when I'm washing dishes. That doesn't happen when I'm taking care of kids. It's only in that particular state of being that these things start they bubble up and they coalesce, because I think that's where, this sounds really new agey, I know, but that's where my cognitive senses aren't in the way. That's not, I'm not arguing with God. I'm not tying it into logic and reason. He can just take me where he is. And it's not that emptying of the new age meditation or anything like that. I was consciously focused on God's word, and he said, hey, let's go here. And because I was relaxed, we went there. And it's amazing. And it's a beautiful, I think it's great teaching. Because it's not mine. So that's the great thing. So,
if it's okay, I think I'll grab that from your Facebook and post it in the website.
Absolutely.
I may have you maybe edit it or something. I'll look at it again, but it's so beautiful. The connections that were just like jaw dropping, and you just wonder where else, Yeah, and I love that.
That's what makes it worthwhile for me. It's all worthwhile. Don't get me wrong. That's the thing that makes me excited, and it's like I'm going to keep digging back into Scripture. And so, but we've got to. If the enemy's going to stop us, we're going to disrupt your sleep. We're going to make you terrified to lay down at night. We're going to make you scared to turn off that light. We're going to make you scared to rest in the Lord. Because if we can keep you from doing that and we can keep you so stressed out, you aren't going to get anywhere with this. It's going to become an hindrance. What God intended to bless you is going to become a curse. And so that's all the enemy can do. That's all he can do. He cannot create. He can only pervert and warp. And so, and I did find it interesting that she was talking about the voice she heard after the episode we did with Lauren.
Yeah. Yep.
It's right there.
Yeah. I mean, and I love how honest it is. She said hi or 5, and it scared me so much. Like, she's 100% sure, right?
Yeah.
And I think in retrospect, she would say it says hi, but in the moment, this is a very much in the moment testimony.
Yeah.
I practically jumped out of my seat and ran to the balcony and didn't see anyone, didn't hear a thing. Sprinted downstairs, grabbed my phone, ran outside. I mean, this is a few years ago. She's probably in college now. She should be a writer. She's really good at this.
Right.
My dad and brother were at a game. I called my dad, asked if he was home. You ever do that whenever you're trying to, are you here? You know?
I'm trying to, well, and that's what we do. We try to make sense of it.
Right.
And that's the other thing. The enemy, when he attacks, when he comes at you like this, it's going to be chaotic. It's not going to have linear reasoning or rationale. And I think sometimes why did that happen? Or why did we hear that? What was the message? What was the intent? Doesn't matter. The intent's to confuse you.
I was crying and shaking and so scared. Yeah. And she called her friend. Took her 5 times to explain what happened. And her friend prayed with her, and she calmed down. And gave her wisdom. This is probably another teenager.
Right.
Right. And said that Lord was trying to send me a message, and only I could decipher it. Like, wow.
Yeah. Well, and what's funny to me is I've been the friend. I never called anyone, and during my panicked moments, probably because there wasn't cell phones around, and we weren't.
Yeah.
If I would have got caught in the living room trying to use the landline, dear Lord.
Yeah.
But I have been the person on the other end of that call, and I think it's really good to have these friends. Which, I mean, that's part of the other part of the attack. It is to isolate, because you're crazy, you're weird, you don't talk about this. So you've got to have friends that you can go to and say, hey, this is what's going on. And I'm totally preaching to the choir here. I'm getting used to actually like putting this stuff out there. I like send you text messages all the time, because part of that I'm practicing. And and I know you're like safe to practice with. I've got a couple other friends I do it with, because I have never been able to talk openly until the last few years. And it's great. I mean, now I've got my daughter, and she's living here on our property, and she'll like, oh, this happened last night. Can't believe they were trying this crap again.
Oh, that's funny. I can see her saying that.
Yeah. But I think it's good to have that. But also, a friend of mine had sent me earlier this week Isaiah 26:3, and it says, "You keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on you, because he trusts in you." And that's why we've got to be intentional. And it's not going to make the attack stop.
Right.
Let's be realistic about that. But I do love that the stayed there, whose mind is stayed on you. It's got this idea of bracing or leaning into. It's not just like I'm going to stay here, kind of in a set position by myself. No, I'm leaning into God. I'm leaning on Him. There's actual physical contact is picture. Because I think so often we don't think of it as like leaning on God. We think of it just, I'm going to sit here like a Buddhist monk and on God. And no, you're falling into His arms. And
I remember that song, that old hymn, leaning, leaning, safe and secure from all alarms.
I do, actually.
Leaning on His everlasting arms. Right. What a great song.
Oh, those old hymns had some good stuff. No, and the thing is, this is something people forget. Those old hymns had good stuff. The ones that we're hearing, because the good ones are what remained. It doesn't mean that hymns are
Right.
inherently superior to praise and worship. It's just they've been winnowed. But the other thing about that verse I love, that you will keep him, that sounds kind of passive, and it actually means to guard, and it means to preserve. And it's the same word that we get like watchman.
Hmm.
And,
Like a keep, like a castle.
yeah, that vigilant kind of,
Hmm.
it's act.
Where's that? Isaiah what? What is that?
Isaiah 26:3.
26:3.
Yeah. And so, this is why we have to keep
Oh yeah.
minds.
Yeah.
Yeah, we gotta keep our minds. They got to be. It's got to be active. It's got to be vigilant, and we got to be fixed on God. Or that's how I learned it. I will keep thee in perfect peace, whose mind is fixed on. I learned it Old King James, but I love perfect peace here too, because in Hebrew it's shalom, shalom. It,
Wow.
yeah, it's that doubling of the word, and so it's like as intense as you can get.
Mhm.
And shalom isn't an absence of conflict. That's a Greek idea of peace. The Hebrew idea of peace is nothing missing, nothing broken.
Right.
And so here it's doubled. And so I love that, because God's saying, I'm going to double your peace. It's going to be the most peace. And again, not an absence of conflict, but
Mhm.
nothing's going to be missing. So everything you need to face this moment, you're going to have it. Nothing's going to break. Your weapon's not going to break in your hands. Your shield isn't going to fall apart. It's all right there. And that's discipline. And I think it's why God allows this to happen sometimes, because it is that training ground. It's teaching you how to hold your ground in the midst of all the distraction. At least that's what's happened with me. And I know I may not be normative, but
This is such a great verses 1-6, because it starts off with, "We have a strong city. He sets up salvation as walls and bulwarks." And it goes on describing the keep, right? Which is like but then he says in verse 5, "He has humbled the inhabitants of the height, the lofty city." He has humbled the inhabitants of the height. So the city up there.
uh-huh.
Trust
Yeah.
in the Lord forever. He is no less rock. He has humbled the inhabitants of the height. So I would read that obviously as the spiritual beings, right?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. The ones
The
that
lofty city, the city up there. We're in the city down here.
are,
This is why poetry is almost a better way to describe what's going on.
oh yeah. Yeah. Well, that's the reason why so many of the prophecies are written in a poetic way. I mean, you go back to the oldest parts of the Bible. We're looking at the Song of the Sea. We're looking at Deborah's song. So these are two of the five oldest portions of the Bible. They're songs which
Hmm.
have that poetic layout, because it's supposed to capture your imagination and take you past the words into that imagery, into that revelation, where you can actually experience it within yourself through that divine awakening of awareness that only happens whenever you're really meditating on what God's doing. And dear Lord, I understand how absolutely cliche and new agey that sound, but this was ours first, okay, people?
Hmm.
This is God's gift to us. So I do. We,
A little bit after the email, you want to jump more into what she's writing? Because I was thinking you went to Isaiah 26. Right after that, I go to Isaiah 58 and then Isaiah 61.
I
Like
saw that.
Isaiah, like
No, I
because I'm angry in again the narrative of the story of the book here. I'm angry at the fear that these visions grip people with, what you're describing at night. And you described earlier, which I'm going to have to clip out of this and make it a reel, how to push through, like how to solve the sleep paralysis, which is basically, it is describing, again, these Psalms, Psalm 61, where Yahweh is our divine warrior. Jesus is our divine warrior who, we push through to him because he's pushed through to us.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think so often we think of we think of Christianity as being so meek, and not in the way that the Greek means it. That we think of it as meek as in how the world's redefined it, and we forget that this is a violent religion in a spiritual sense.
Yeah.
And so we've got to teach people how to fight on the spiritual front. And
Yeah, Isaiah 26, he trust in Yahweh forever. He has thrown down the inhabitants of the height. He has laid low the lofty city. He lays it low to the ground. He throws her to the dust. The dust, right? That's the serpent. That's that same language.
right
The
back,
foot of who? Of what? Humans trample it. The feet of the poor, the steps of the needy. So there's the gospel where the wealthy are
and
brought
crushing
down and the poor up.
serpent.
Yeah, and same thing, crushing the serpent. And then in Isaiah 63, he's like, I trod them in my anger, I trampled them in my wrath, I spattered their juice on my garments. He's talking about blood. I stained all my clothing. And what they didn't realize, what Isaiah probably didn't realize, because he asks in 63 verse 2, why are your garments red? Yahweh goes off to battle. He comes back. Why are your garments red? Because in here he said, I've spattered with the blood of my enemies. What we come to realize is his own blood that he has on his garments, and that is how the enemy is defeated. Yeah, so it is very violent. No, don't take swords and go after, the people
Right.
of another religion. This is a spiritual conflict, right? And it is violent. But he's our warrior.
Yes. And he's training us how to be warriors in this way, in that spiritual way. And that looks so different than it'd be so much easier if I could just go beat up a demon. It would be so much easier if I could just go whack somebody who was doing a demon's bidding. I've asked God if that was permissible, and so far I've yet to get the memo that it's okay. It takes a certain level of discipline and self-control to do that renewing of our mind so that we can keep it fixed, so that we don't go wandering off into what if, or I can do this, I can manipulate that way. Because so often our mode and method of fighting is being still and know
Mhm.
he's God and stop acting like it's on us to fix it.
You think about the great spiritual incursion in Genesis 6. So then the flood comes, right? And then after the flood, God puts his bow in the clouds.
Hmm.
Like think weapon.
Yeah.
So when you see the rainbow, it's a bow.
Uh-huh.
It's a weapon, like a bow and arrow. And then later, those visions of the throne, the bow is over the throne.
Yeah, like the rifle over a mantle in a cottage or
Yes.
somewhere. Yeah, it's exactly that.
So look at when you see a rainbow, think of it. Oh, that's his weapon.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what he did to take out the giant infested earth.
Right.
Because of what the Watchers did. I mean, humans infested it with wickedness, but it's all related, all similar, all related. Wow, did not expect to go there.
Well, it's all connected, and I think that's one of the beautiful things is when you realize it is all connected, and even those minute things that seem to be happening just to you or just for you, it is connected to a bigger picture. So yes, I think we can stop for a moment and be just blown away that this was my experience in this moment, and this is how God manifests himself to me. But then you go, okay, what's the bigger picture? And so it's that balance of I am the most important thing that God has ever created, and I am just one of many important things that God created. And so we're right back to the infinite God. And
Yeah.
the thing that the divine council worldview does with spiritual warfare, it's about us, but it's not. And it puts this weird kind of tension on humanity's position in creation as being both incredibly important and completely superfluous. I mean, it's odd. It's that paradox, but that it is with God. And we still got, I mean, a couple other things we're kind of running up.
Yeah. I'm just rereading this email. One day I was trying to go to sleep. I got a vision. It was 3 images, 1 sound, and a time. I don't even know what that means, but it's really cool. It's like, does that not just describe a vision at night? 3 images, 1 sound, and a time. Because we're talking about time travel
Right.
and how time is weird and this. All right, sorry. What were you going to say? I'm sorry.
But that's how it is a lot of times when you're seeing stuff. It's like you'll get that little glimmer of something, and it may take you weeks or months to go, that's what that means. And I love one of my favorite verses is Luke talking about Mary, pondering what the angel said in her heart. It took her 33 years to understand the full import of what that angel had told to her in that moment.
Right.
And I think a lot of seers feel like they're failures if they can't completely undo the riddle. And even a lot of times when God has said, "Hey, you need to talk to somebody about X, Y, or Z," and I've had to go to them and go, "I got these words, and they don't even seem related. 3 images, kind of thing." Being faithful, a lot of times they're the ones with the other piece of the puzzle, and me just being faithful to go say the words out loud. Like, yeah, got it. Totally makes sense. And so sometimes whenever we are given this stuff, it's because we need to ponder it, and sometimes it's because we're supposed to go to someone and they've got the rest of the puzzle piece. So, but that takes wisdom and discernment, trying to figure out what that step is.
I love that how she pondered it in her heart. Yeah, for 3 decades.
Yeah.
Then how much longer after that before she told somebody?
Right.
Did Luke pry it out of her?
Right. Would you love to know if that conversation would have been like?
She would have been elderly then, to Luke or Paul or whoever, so, like there's all this. I've read Matthew's account. Let's get it from your perspective,
Yeah.
And well, let me tell you.
And there's good evidence that Luke did exactly that. And so, and you have to wonder, was she bursting at the seams? Did he pry it out? What? Yeah.
Now's the time to say. Now's the time to tell.
I did love that when she talked about she could see spirits, and sometimes they're outlines or black and white blurs.
Yeah.
I call these smudges. This is like a lot of times, 90% of the time, this is what I'm going to see. It's not going to be a full on, like I said, there's an angel patrolling the house. I've seen him, and I've seen pieces of him in detail, but it's more like heat waves off a pavement.
Yeah.
And so they're just there. And so that was the one of the things I wanted to point out, because a lot of times we talk ourselves into believing, oh, it's just a trick. It's just the light. It's just and I found sometimes it is. Don't get me wrong. Sometimes it is. But I have found that whenever it lingers too long, you blink, you look away, you change your position. Those are the ones that really want you to see them. So, and they will be seen. You will see them. So,
I just how descriptive when she says, outline black and white or blurs. I could tell you the number of spirits in a room sometimes and point them out to you, but sometimes I don't because I get a bad feeling about it.
Well, yeah. You don't say the stuff out loud, or it's at some point. I do think you reached a point in time where you go, yeah, it's not worth it. They're here, whatever. And it's just the ones who, for me now, it's the ones that I know I'm supposed to definitely say something about. A few weeks ago, a gentleman at church had 3 angels with him, and it's like, okay, Lord, they're kind of making a big deal about the fact they're here. So do I need to say something? The rest of the time, it's kind of like, yeah, they're here. Yeah, it's like acknowledging all the birds in the trees. Are you to do that? I mean, it's just so. But
she says, my family doesn't know about this. I'm scared they'll throw me in a mental institution if they did. And more to the point, she says, I don't have the best relationship with my parents either. I think there's like this rite of passage that we assume to be true in this country, that teens aren't to get along with their parents.
Right.
And I think parents need to reject that. I think parents need to reject that assumption. I know many families who get along great, and their kids tell them everything. But you have to start young. Now, if you're a parent and you're like, it's too late, my teen, or no, you just have to figure out, you have to get out of your comfort zone and work on that relationship, because this poor girl can't go to her own parents about this.
And she's alone. I mean, she is completely alone.
And she's going to teens. She's going to a stranger on the internet, right?
Yeah.
Turns out that it's me. But who else did she go to? You
Well,
know, I mean,
that's why so many of them wind up talking to psychics and mediums and all of these other, people who are not going to point her back to Jesus. They're going to deny the importance of Jesus and God's word. And so, you don't want your kids doing that. And so talk to them. Well, I'm not going to go down. There's a rabbit trail I was going to go down. We're going to avoid that. But
okay.
But sometimes I cry myself to sleep because I'm scared.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know any seer who has not had this experience.
Yeah.
I don't. And
often I would lay down, for years, I would lay down with Annalise.
Mm-hmm.
Even as a teen, I would lay down, I would stroke her hair because she didn't want to be left alone at night. She'd be scared.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point I did realize that she was crying herself to sleep sometimes. And I was horrified at that. Like, well, then I'm going to be in here.
Yeah.
Stroking her hair until she fell asleep. Was it convenient? No. I wanted to go watch my Star Trek or whatever. I wanted to go watch whatever I wanted, because, but I didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know what else to do. And like, we have to support each other in this.
Well, and to admit, what it sounds like when you're a teenager and you're going through this, what it sounds like is, I'm scared of the dark.
Right.
And that sounds so ridiculous.
Yeah.
And so now you're right back to, I'm crazy. There's something wrong with me. What's going on? And again, I go back to how much of our Bible would not have been written if it weren't for people who had the similar experiences. I mean, Ezekiel, John, Isaiah, when they're teenagers, when they're kids and they're seeing this stuff, what are their parents telling them? I wonder this stuff. I wonder what, we know what happened when Joseph said, hey, I had a dream. And he goes to his brothers and they're like, they make fun of him. So this is not new.
Right.
This has been part of the seer experience since the beginning of time, from what I can tell in the Bible. And so that's actually good news, because it means we're not strange. This is normal. Mm-hmm. It's okay. You can get through this. And so that's what I think we all need to hear ultimately, is that, yes, this is normal, but beyond that, there's a purpose behind it, and God has given us this gift for a reason.
That's right.
And it's not just to make us misfits and crazy people in the eyes of the world. You might be, but embrace it, for we are a peculiar priesthood. Okay, it's there. It's there in Peter.
You're on the island of misfit toys, but every misfit had a family to go support.
Absolutely.
So. Well, let's just wrap it up there. Unless you have anything else anything else you have that jumped out at you with this?
Okay, one final note.
Yeah.
She just mentions that she gets deja vu. I know every seer I know gets deja vu. And again, right back to, that's normal. So it happens all the time. And it's not just a glitch in the matrix. And it's not because you didn't get enough sleep. There's
right. I love this. The end sentence of that paragraph. I'd always get deja vu. I'd always hear someone call my name, and I would turn my back, and no one would be there. So I figured it was God telling me. And at first, her friend said it was either because he was trying to tell me something, or he just loves saying my name.
True. And so her friend is teaching her just to be chill, relax.
Just like Eli.
Mm-hmm. Samuel.
Samuel, right. Yeah, Samuel. Eli, master. No.
Paul. I mean,
yeah. You just love saying her name. I got touched just reading that again here.
The reason why Paul knew that it was God calling him and not any other spiritual entity was because he said his name twice. If you go back into the Old Testament, every time God calls a name, Abraham, when at the sacrifice of Isaac, Samuel, it's always twice. And So I believe that that's a good litmus test. So when you're hearing something and say your name twice, okay, Lord, I'm here.
Mhm.
Do that. What have you got to lose? And maybe it is just because he wants to say your name. Maybe it's because he's got something bigger to say. So listen. That's where I'm at.
Right there.
Thank you for listening to the Seers podcast. Opening and closing music is Sun by Jason Callahan. Bumper music includes Just Around the World and Alta Heron by Keela Caps. Music and Seers podcast are distributed under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0.